Hello, I am Sajana. Today we are going to discuss on the topic Narration and Representation from Methodology of Humanities, Module 3. Before going to the module, let me pose certain questions like, is there something called reality? Of course, our answer will be yes. Then if yes, what are our realities? Of course, our realities are those things which we believe is true, or those things which we can see, which we can identify with our senses, right? Then how is reality constructed? Realities are based on the codes of perception which we acquire from the society or the culture in which we are living. Then, how will you represent your realities? Possibly there are two options. One is, if it's a particular thing, you can show them this is the thing which I'm talking about. Or if it is a particular concept or a particular thing which happened in the past, one of the possible ways is that you can tell them. So we have two options to represent our realities. One is to show and the other one is to tell. Now the last question, what will be your medium which you use to represent realities? The answer is very clear from the fourth question itself, like the only medium which we can use to represent our realities is language. So it is with the help of language that we can represent our realities. Now this module is all about narration and representation. So already we have discussed like that narration is a part of representation, or what are we representing? We are representing realities. So in order to represent the realities, we are narrating certain things. And how are we narrating? We are narrating with the help of language. So it is with the help of language that we convey certain things to somebody else. It's not certain things. We are talking almost everything with the help of language. So narrative is a part of general process of representation which takes place in human discourse. So here we have used the word human discourse because communication happens between human beings. So narrative is the active representation of words, sounds, visuals and gestures using signs in particular sequence. We can instruct and interpret the world around us using language. So all these words, sounds, figures and relations are part of language. Narrative is an active communication whereby the events or the character and what happens to them is communicated by somebody to somebody else in language. Now this is a continuation of narration. Here you can see 2 points. Narratives relate a clear sequence of events. It contains several elements like characters, plot and setting. So in order to elaborate this point, let me ask you something like, think of a story which you have heard before. Like once upon a time, there lived a king, then he had a daughter, likewise. So you can see that the story is arranged in a particular sequence. Like one happens after the other, then the other thing, then the other, like that. So it is the same way in which we communicate our past, we communicate certain things, we communicate our concepts to other person. And it contains characters, plot, settings, etc. too. So one of the most important points is that narrative is almost always related with a clear sequence of events, and it contains several elements like a characters, plot and setting. Narrative theory and narratology deal with how such an act of communication takes place. Now, how such act of communication means how meaning is evolved during narration. Now, narratology is a discipline that studies in the logic, principles and practices of narrative representation. Now, this slide shows a diagram constructed by Seymour Chapman, which is related to narrative communication. Seymour Chapman was an American film critic and a literary critic too, and one of the most significant figures related to American narratology. And there are many theories which is related to narrative communication and narratology. This is one of the popular one. Here in the figure, you can see there is a rectangular blue box which is given, and there is a real author and a real reader which is placed outside the box. Now you can assume that the rectangular box which is given here is a text, any text or a narrative text. And it is that the real author and real reader is placed outside the narrative text. Here the real author and real reader means the real flesh and blood kind of human beings, which means the writer has wrote that particular text. And the other one is the reader, the real reader. So that is why we are using the term real author and real reader. And their position is actually outside the text. And who is inside the box? You can see two pairs. One is the implied author, implied reader, narrator and narratee. Here in this slide you can see that the real author and the real reader exist outside the text, but communication takes place between the constructed pairs within the text. Now who are those constructed pairs? As we have already discussed, like it is the implied author and implied reader, narrator and narratee. Now implied author is the all authorial presence, that is the idea of the reader about the author. Implied reader is the counterpart of the implied author, almost the opposite, like the author will have certain concept which is related to the reader, who is going to be the reader. Now there is a third pair, that is the narrator and the narratee. Narrator is the one who tells the story and narratee is to whom the narrator addresses, or the narratee is a listener within the text. Now, we are moving to see what is the relation between reality and representation, or rather how is reality being represented. Reality enters our consciousness through a combination of neurological bodily functions, our eye, skin, etc., or our sense organs, and cultural factors that influence the way we see things. Narratives are a version of reality where acceptability has been established by social, critical, communal, and common practices of interpretations. Or in other words, we can say that we perceive through our senses, right? So what we perceive through our senses gains meaning with the already established norms of the society or the culture in which the individual lives. That is, he gives meaning with the help of his subjectivity. So the reality which we perceive is only one version of reality. It is true, at the same time, it is the individual's truth. So narratives are a version of reality. Representation of reality. In the first slide itself, I posed a question like, how are you going to represent your reality? And we have two answers. One is you can show or you can tell. Now these are the technical terms which is given here. One is mimesis and the other one is diegesis. Mimesis is imitation, and it is a concept which is put forward by the Greek philosopher Plato and later modified by Aristotle. Plato believed in the existence of an absolute or ultimate reality, which he called as idea. And according to him, things are imitation of this original idea, and as it is imitation, it is once removed from reality. Now, art is the imitation of things, and because of that, art is twice removed from reality. In order to make things more clear, we'll go for an example. Like, think of a carpenter who is going to make a chair. So before the making, that person will have an idea which is related to what kind of a chair he is going to make. That concept or that idea can be called as absolute or ultimate reality. Now the carpenter is making a chair for real. So that real thing is actually the product of imagination, and that is once removed from reality. Reality which he had in his mind. Now suppose an artist is painting the picture of this particular chair, or he's drawing a picture of this particular chair. So the artist is imitating a thing which is already an imitation. So that product or the final art is twice removed from reality. So from Plato, we are moving to Aristotle, one of the popular disciples of Plato. So here Aristotle accepts almost all the concepts put forward by Plato, but at the same time, he's making certain changes, making certain suggestions too. He accepts the concept of mimesis or imitation, but at the same time, he's saying that art is not just imitating things, but through art, what an artist is doing, what a poet is doing, is actually recreating or improving the original thing to make it a more perfect model. So, according to Aristotle, mimesis is an act of imagination and recreation. Now, catharsis is another term which is introduced by Aristotle. So, according to him, catharsis is the effect of creative imitation or mimesis. In other words, we can say that it is a kind of a purification of an emotion or a purgation of emotion which the spectator or the viewer or the reader feels after seeing an art, any kind of art form. So catharsis is actually a kind of a cleansing effect. It gives a kind of a relief to the spectator. So it is related to mimesis because mimesis is related to art. Mimesis is the direct representation of reality. So what are these realities? Realities are related to human beings, or realities which is related to human life. So art is imitating these realities. So as art is imitating these realities, it reveals various facets of human life and human nature. Now from mimesis, we are moving to the other concept called diegesis. Now diegesis is the opposite of mimesis. Like if mimesis is imitation or showing, diegesis is telling. Diegesis is an indirect representation or a representation of reality. Now, almost all narratives make use of both these things, mimesis and diegesis. In order to explain further, we'll go for an example like take a movie. So in a movie you can see settings, background and characters which is described, which can be shown in detail. But there will be certain things, certain truths, certain hidden truths or realities which the viewer should find out by themselves, from the conversations between the characters or the hidden intention which is going to happen, though, etc. So these things are indirectly represented. These things will be usually indirectly represented. So there is a direct representation of characters, plot, setting, and background, and there are certain things, certain hidden truths, and um, concepts the real nature, intention of the villain or the hero, etc., will be understood indirectly. So there is direct representation and indirect representation. So the movies make use of both the diegesis and mimesis. Likewise, in a novel, the descriptions of settings, characters, background, actions, and events might be described directly, and this may be mimetic, but the personality of a character may not be directly represented. So the narrator describes the character through a telling of the actions of the character, and it is diegetic. Diegesis. So we are going to conclude the session of representation of reality. So to conclude it in 2 points, we can say that representation of reality, it is a process through which the events, ideas and people are described in a medium. Medium of course is language, and the final product. The final product here means the final product which acquires meaning through codes of perception. Thank you. So we'll